Live?
We're not late, you are.
Late? Yeti's never late, Dave.
No. He arrives
I tell you what,
precisely when he means
is there a
to.
control? It might be as the fans a little bit. There's a little bit of heat on there, but yeah, if you just joined us,
You're a bit warm.
It's a bit warm. I think all the rushing around, right?
Rushing away, mate.
Right, let's wait for some people to arrive. I hope all is well with all of you Evertrekkers out there. Yeah, if you joined us, do drop in the comments.
Hello.
Laura Collins. Laura Collins is on it as always. Yeah, and anyone else who's out there, maybe it's your first Tuesday tune-in. Always interested to see. Dave, you having fun? You can't go to work. Would you like me to have a go? It's a good angle.
It's on, but it's not turning. There it is.
Dave is having some fan issues.
Honestly, if you knew how hot it got in this room, you'd understand. Laura Collins again.
I know. She's on it. She's
amazing.
But yeah, hope all is well on this
Rebecca
lovely
Butterflies and Bees.
She's back. Also, Bri as well. Great stuff. Great to see some familiar faces. And yeah, almost the end of January as well. Wow, I can't believe.
Is it?
It's actually flying by, isn't it, Dave? Absolutely flying by. Anyway, today, so we wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit. I know we've talked about New Year's resolutions, challenges, and we've talked about other things, equipment. We talked about some skills, winter skills, which was sort of winter skills weekend this weekend, which was absolutely great with loads of Evertrekkers up in Scotland. But we wanted to kind of switch you back to the altitude side of stuff, and especially around breathing at altitude. People that maybe might have some breathing issues at altitude, and also ways that if it's your first time at altitude, what does it feel like? What can you do to help that? And that's where we thought we started today, wasn't it? And
yeah,
we'd sort of discuss that, and
exactly.
Had lots of questions in around it as well.
Yeah, because it's one of those things I think that can surprise people when they go to altitude, which is the way that your breathing is affected.
Yes.
I mean, we all know it, when you're walking and you head up a set of steps or something like that, and then you start to feel it takes you a little bit longer to recover, but sometimes it could be a bit more than that as well, can't it? It can be Absolutely. A little disconcerting. And as we always say, knowledge dispels fear. So we talk about it, learn about it, and you can expect it. Then when it does happen, it's not so frightening and it doesn't startle you and you're not concerned about it. You can just manage it.
Exactly. Because there's nothing worse than, you get to altitude, or even in the UK or, wherever you're watching this from. If you're out and about hiking and Dave?
I'm trying to get my questions up, but I opened...
Open Facebook?
Yeah, by accident. It was the last thing that I opened. Anyway, we never let professionalism get away with a good show, do we?
I know, I can tell. No, we always like to have a bit of fun. Sorry, I was wondering where I was going. Yeah, when you're out in the UK, that's right, and you're doing hiking, anything at all. Like even the weekend we were on, it was quite cold air. And it's proven that cold air can restrict your lungs in terms of the way you breathe. So, you've got to go a little bit slower.
I learned that in the cold water dip.
When it shocks you.
Yeah. When I get in the water, everyone's like, calm down, breathe. And I'm like, I can't. It was horrible.
I was just reading one of these then. There's another question that came in, but we'll come into that in a bit. It was just a really interesting question.
Nice.
That popped in. And Jody, who's on the comments, dropped it in. Yeah, we got quite a lot of questions actually. But yeah, going back to, as Dave said there, cold, can constrict the body. Cold water more so. But certainly, I mean, any asthmatics out there, anyone that, suffers with any kind of chronic or any form of lung issue, especially post-COVID, I think we got a lot of people now who are in the mountains, doing the same that they did pre-COVID, but their bodies might be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I was chatting with Steve, who was guiding us and the instructor on the weekend, and we were talking about, he's had a lot of clients, that have, obviously long COVID, but it could be just the after effects of COVID that, really we don't know a lot of yet because it hasn't been that long time. There's not a lot of testing that's been going on. So, the way to go about it, I suppose, is that if your body is reacting differently whilst doing the same stuff, then, just take it easy a little bit, because your body is still adjusting, especially from your, your respiratory side of things. Mm-hmm. It could take a little bit more time for you to recover. We've certainly noticed certain things. We've had COVID a few times, over the last couple of years. And although we want to leave that kind of word behind, it can still have effects on us, especially your altitude, because some people who've been at altitude before COVID, and now going back to altitude, is it going to be different? Those questions going to throw up some things, or what can we do just to kind of, again, go back to the basics and do the things that you used to do, just maybe not push your body to its limits as much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, 100%. I mean, COVID's a funny one.
Yeah.
I've definitely had it twice now. I suspect a third time as well, but
You probably have.
I don't know. But anyway, it took me a long time to actually recover from it properly.
Yeah.
I found that it wasn't just a case of, a couple of weeks after I've tested positive that I was okay again. It took months to kind of build it back up and readjust. I think what worked for me, and I don't know the official advice, is I found like just going back to exercise, going back to trekking, and kind of just getting back to my routine as quickly as possible really helped. But then maybe I didn't have the long COVID issues, so maybe people can't do that. So it is an interesting thing. I'll be really fascinated to see what people know about it in 10, 20 years time.
So I just reading Bry. Always Bry. The humor, as always, mate. Love it. My body doesn't react the same when I run anymore. That's not enough to do with COVID. It's because I'm getting too old.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Some good questions as well. And I don't want to kind of jump the gun with certain questions because we've had a lot before. I think anytime we talk about lungs and breathing and altitude, there's always some popular questions, and rightly so. We want to get comfortable with it, right? Before you go to altitude, I remember the first time I went to altitude, there was that anxiety of, am I going to be all right? Like I'm an asthmatic, and it's kind of got worse over the years. I'm managing it. It doesn't kind of stop me, touch wood, from doing anything. And I think Matt's charity want to do a trek so bad, but worried about asthma up in thin air. And honestly, Matt, it was a big thing of mine. I was on a beach in Thailand. What was it? Probably 2009. Reading Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, which talks about the 1996 Everest disaster.
I couldn't think of a much juxtaposition there, by the way.
I know it is. Yeah, reading something that when you're reading it, you're feeling freezing cold, but it's still 35 degrees in Thailand. But anyway, the inspiration really for me wanting to go to altitude was that how will my body fare? Will I be okay? Will I be able to go to somewhere like Everest Base Camp? And I think obviously, fast forward, obviously like 13, 14 years now, and knowing the kind of what my body can do and what asthmatics can do and what people who, and I'm not saying do this, but actually we've heard that a lot of smokers actually do pretty well at altitude. And I think there's some science behind that. If you're used to a low oxygen environment already, because your lungs aren't as good, apparently that's really good when you're at altitude.
As part of your training, take up 20 a day.
Well, I'm not saying start it, but if your body is essentially adjusted to normal life over a long period of time. But no. Smoking aside, obviously we don't want to get to do that, but there is science around it that especially with asthmatics and the science of asthmatics, they actually tend to do well at altitude.
Well, look at Mogens Jensen. If any of you want to look up him, I think he was Swedish or Danish. Anyway, Scandinavian. And he summited Everest. He attempted to do it several times without oxygen, but couldn't quite get there.
Yeah.
But he's definitely summited now, I think once or twice. And he's a triathlete, mega fit guy. I think with anything like that, you've learned about just managing it, and making sure that you have what you need when you go to those mountains.
Same as at sea level. You manage it the same way. We go back to cold and there's certain triggers with asthma. It's dust. It could be allergies, things like that. Or the cold weather, exercise induced is quite a lot with some people. But if you manage it the same way you do at altitude.
Yeah,
altitude, sea level.
Yeah, exactly. The same way you do it at altitude is when you're training for sea level.
Yeah, that's it.
But
imagine it worked like that. Right?
It's funny though. I'm very lucky that I've never had asthma.
Yeah,
I thought I had it one time, but it turned out I was just unfit. But but I know my mum has it. I know you have it. And it's one of those where you do feel like, I always think like when you're ever trekking with anyone, as long as they got their inhaler or whatever medication they need, there's no reason why they can't just go and do what everyone else does. Like you've never had really any issues at altitude.
No.
And I find that strange though. Because,
I know, it's weird, isn't it?
Because
I could just be lucky, right?
Because like I've noticed with you, if you get a cold, it goes straight to your chest.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
But yet when you're at altitude, it's fine.
I think also as well, there's a lot that goes into it, and luck does come into it. That maybe your physiology can just be suited to altitude. Genetics potentially. Although genetically, I did something last year and proved that I'm 99.8% from the UK. So I was definitely going back. Although 0.2%.
Yeah.
Gujarati in India, apparently.
Really?
I know, crazy, huh?
I wonder
Who
where
knows?
that came from.
Mad, eh?
Did any of your relatives like
No.
serve in India or anything like that?
Maybe, like, you're talking hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
But so definitely with me, but genetically, I don't think many of my ancestors lived at high altitude. But anyway,
You do love Indian food, though.
I do. Maybe that's right.
Maybe that's where it's there. It comes from there.
Maybe that's what it is.
I need to do one of those. I'd love to find out where it's from.
99.8% Yeti, surely. Chris? Exactly. We're all Yetis from the UK, right? In some form. Especially with the old facial hair.
I'll tell you what, one thing
Go on.
I was going to talk to you about.
Okay.
Which is when you get used to trekking with Andy, there's a certain sound, right, when he's like in front of you or behind you,
Okay.
where it's a
Oh, the breathing style. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
and I've noticed people that aren't used to it.
They
You
think
think you're struggling,
Yeah.
Because we'll start like, and it happens like as soon as we start, and it's like all day. And I actually remember one time when me and you climbed Snowdon with Steve, who you just spent a weekend on, and he turned and went, "You all right?" And you were like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I was like, "You just got to let it happen."
That's just the way he breathes.
What's your
What's the
process
science
behind that? Like, why do you do that?
I think essentially almost trial by error. When I went to Everest Base Camp the first time, I wanted to get as much oxygen in as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
And the best way was doing that Darth Vader breathing style. Probably not too far from the truth.
It's not bad.
You're kind of like, so you're trying to get the carbon dioxide out of your body, and it's excess carbon dioxide in your body that triggers the breathing reflex. Now, I wasn't actually thinking about this at the time. All I was thinking is that I'll breathe more when I'm at altitude. Surely that'll help. But then after doing the research, speaking to the guys at the Altitude Center, and I think someone mentioned, I think it was Andrew there, about Wim Hof. It's similar breathing techniques. I've been doing it for quite a long time, and it basically gets more oxygen in my body. It means that when you're on a climb, and I'm constantly doing that. When I get to the top, I can talk.
Yeah.
I haven't got to catch my breath. Rarely. If I'm in a good physical state, and I think that's why. Yeah, I've kind of continued that habit, knowing that the first time I went to base camp I was fine.
Yeah.
And I was good, well hydrated, and then after doing some research on it and doing that type of breathing, it does help.
Yeah.
Just because you're getting more oxygen into the body. Because in my mind, I was thinking, well, I'm going to an environment that's oxygen deprived, right? There's less here, especially at base camp. It's 50% less than sea level. So I was thinking, well, I just need to breathe more.
Yeah.
or try and get more in. So, and that's where it came from. And, whether that's helped me, because of my asthma and all that, who knows? But I think anyone out there that, hasn't been to altitude before, I know there's a lot of ever trekkers who have on here, and will know the feeling, but essentially you breathe the same way. It's just that when you exert yourself, you do breathe more.
Yeah, I mean, you could be sat, at base camp or on top of Kalapata, and we could have a conversation like this. It doesn't feel different.
No.
The difference is how your body reacts to that lack of oxygen. So the way the first time I ever felt altitude, I'd got to Namche, hadn't felt it all the way up, hadn't noticed any shortness of breath. But me and my friend Billy, like we were on the bottom floor, was where we were sleeping, and the food was 2 up. So Billy went up there, and I was like, I'll catch you up. And then I just ran up the 2 steps of stairs, which I know I would be able to do relatively easily. And when I got to the top, I was like, whoa, I was like stars in my eyes. I was like,
yeah.
Whew. I felt a bit like, I was like, wow. And I remember running into Billy like a kid, like, I felt altitude. And he was like, yeah, great, mate. And I was like, well, it's great for me because it was like, I'd always wanted to know how it felt all my life. I've been reading books about altitude and Everest and expeditions. And it kind of felt, I don't know, it was the first moment, even though it was only Namche, where I felt like I'm in that arena. And ever since I go back, I always think like, I wonder where I'm going to have that feeling for the first time. Will it be below Namche? Will it be higher than Namche? And for me, it's always usually the same. I start to notice it at Namche, not so much that it affects me, but if you're walking up and down those steps in Namche, you can easily get a bit tired.
I think anytime, you go to like 2,500 meters. If any of you are into skiing, you go to the Alps or anything over 2,000 meters. You only got to exert yourself to be like, oh, geez, we were in Andorra a week before last.
Unbelievable.
And
the lift was broke.
We were on the 6th floor of this apartment. The lift was broke, so you got to carry all your gear up there. And we're pretty fit, but even 6 floors every day with all your gear,
ski boots.
2,200 meters is hard work. You can feel your heart kind of going, 10 to the
Well,
dozen.
we did
You're
it.
like, whoa.
We do it up and down.
Yeah.
You go down to go skiing, up when you're done. Down to go out, up when you get back. 4 times a day. Man, that was hardcore.
Just gotta the way it changes how you approach certain things. You're right. If it can take everything with you and it minimizes the time I've got to climb those stairs, that's where it came to in the end.
Yeah, well, I remember you were like, right, okay. I was like, I'm going shopping, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna wait for you to come back because I ain't going back down those stairs again. But yeah, it was big. One thing I'm going to mention as well, because my dad had this. I think John, the great bald Yeti, may have had this as well. Is something called periodic breathing, which I had to look up after my first time at altitude. And I guarantee you there are people who are listening now that can comment and say they've had this. And you usually get it from about 3,000 meters and above. Periodic breathing normally takes place when you're asleep or just about to fall asleep. And it's characterized by a few deep breaths followed by like shallow breathing. And then this panicked and you sort of like
it's like sleep apnea.
You don't really notice the deep breathing or the shallow breathing. It's not as subtle as like that. It's more that you'll be taking deeper breaths and then shallower breaths. And with each shallow breath, you're getting a little bit less oxygen out of the already oxygen-starved environment, and you'll go and you'll wake up, and it can be. I'd be honest with you, I actually choked a little bit then.
Honestly, it's going to be a golden globe in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah. So if any film people need periodic breathing on camera, let me know. But yeah, and it can be quite frightening when you wake up because it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 breaths before you start to feel like you're calming down and you're getting the oxygen. It's quite a primordial fear. You're not able to sort of complete that basic function. It's kind of like sleep apnea in a way.
It is. The same process is essentially happening because your body is going, I need more oxygen. Get it for me. And then that's where it's kind of like, get it for me, please. You see that lizard part of that lizard brain, the one that's protecting you, is going, breathe. So it forces you to do that. But if you're not used to it, it can be quite scary.
Yeah, definitely.
I know a lot of Evertrekkers that have suffered with this on base camp.
My dad.
And your dad. And we were talking about it over breakfast in the morning, over a coffee. And we're like, oh, yeah, did you have that, guys? And we're like, and it's not until you realize actually a lot of people do go through that. That it is part of the process. And any time you're on a mountain or at high altitude, it is not everyone. Some people are lucky. I've rarely had that happen to me, but I have felt it from time to time, especially above 5,000 meters. And it's part of the process. Try not to let it scare you. Your body was waking you up to breathe, and it just try and reassure yourself that it is part of that process of your body acclimatizing. Unfortunately, one of the harder ones to ignore because it can be quite scary. But it's not as easy kind of to deal with as, okay, I've got a headache, or I'm being sick, or I don't feel hungry. The other symptoms that are happening that you can kind of address. It's hard, isn't it? Because you can't really get, you need to sleep, and a lot of people actually do say that sometimes, and not everyone sleeps well at altitude. We know people that haven't slept for days and days, and it's hard. That's what makes part of the challenge. But they get to base camp or they get to the summit of Kili, and they were like, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And sometimes, that does happen. And we've kind of got to get comfortable with that. But hopefully it's not. But if things like that do happen, just know that is part of what it's like.
100%
sometimes.
I mean, and it's a little bit scary at altitude because when you have that type of stuff in sea level and you kind of jolt awake, you're at sea level when you're breathing.
Yes.
So you can regain your breath quite quickly, and it's like in an instant it's over.
Yeah.
Where when it happens at altitude, it can go on for a few seconds, and they're hot seconds when you feel like you can't breathe. I usually find that if that starts happening, and touch wood, it's never happened to me, but I've been on enough trips and known enough people who are close to me who have had it, that it's a good sign that you should perhaps switch to Diamox. Diamox is not only an aid to stop altitude sickness, but also a lot of the other things that can affect you at altitude.
Yeah.
Like one of them is those breathing. One of them is sleep disturbances. The other one is appetite. Diamox is a real big thing to help with that. The other two things, which are really good, and it's the same for sleep apnea at sea level, is to do with fitness and body weight. And trust me, I know if you're a little bit overweight, I snore more, right?
Definitely. I can vouch for that.
You can vouch for that. Yeah.
I can vouch for that.
And when I'm at I'm happy to admit I'm a yo-yo. I always have been. I'm always I can always get to the summit, But sometimes I get to the summit, you know, feeling pretty good. Sometimes I get there feeling like I could have done without a few pounds.
Yeah.
But I think that it really does make a difference with how well you do. The other big one is fitness as well, which is why I'll always put in some training before I go on any trip. The reason is because cardiovascular fitness in particular, and having good, strong muscles that, you know, have a lot of endurance, your body is far more efficient at sending blood and oxygen around your body.
Definitely.
It needs less to do more when you're fit. So if you start to get, you know, towards, you know, quite unfit, that's the more that you'll exert yourself, the more your body will demand oxygen.
Yep.
The higher you go, there's less there. So you start to have this kind of like snowball effect where, you know, even though you're kind of resting at night, you wake up and you don't feel as recovered.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to be super fit, not saying you have to be a marathon runner, but I just think putting in some training at sea level to kind of get yourself just a couple of degrees fitter than you were will make a vast difference when you're at altitude.
Yeah, and Mario's asked there, Mario Gold, you know, as a trainer, I can do sea level that prepares me for the altitude. Good question, Mario. And yeah, welcome to Tuesday Tune In. Not sure if you've been before. Is this your first one? Always good to see if there's any new Tuesday tuners.
He might have been a watcher, but I think I'd remember Mario Gold. If
well, this is it. It's a great name.
If he'd have been there before. But anyway, welcome, Mario.
Yeah, and any training you can do at sea level. And as Dave said there, any training that you do, you know, get out, pack on your back, you know, maybe a bit heavier than normal. You know, try and do some, you know, 2, 3, 4 hikes a month if you can. Obviously, depending on life, depending on work, you know, what your diary's looking at. But if you can get out, do some walking, because that's what you're going to do. You know, majority of your altitude. Obviously, if you are doing any technical stuff, you want to get that as well. Similar to like this weekend, just got it in the Cairngorms. We did a lot of winter skills stuff. So if you climb an island peak, you know, you go into like Chimborazo in Ecuador, you know, one of our trips, things like that. There are, you know, get out there and do as much as you can. Obviously, you don't want to burn out, so taper that training off before you start the trip. But it can prepare you for the altitude, but it's not really, you can't like pre-acclimatize in that way. That's really just about getting your body in the best physical shape possible. And then all the acclimatization is done on trip. Obviously, there are ways that you can speed that up through altitude tents, you know, things like that. You can what they call hypoxic training. Our partners at the Altitude Center have got a lot of tech regarding that. And obviously, if you booked with us, do go into the membership area. You will be able to see one of their forms. You can basically fill that in. They'll send you basically a little bit of a training plan for you in time for your trip. And some of that might involve some of their pre-acclimatization, which, you know, they're scientifically proven that does help. But, you know, with all the thousands of trekkers that we've had at high altitude, the tried and tested, going slow, drinking plenty of water, keeping hydrated, listening to your guide, the advice, trying to enjoy it, and, you know, basically keeping that kind of really strong mindset that you're going to succeed will help you at altitude. You know, but like I said, your answer there to my answer to question one, definitely just get out there and do what you can. Get out in the mountains. If there's no mountains around you, get to the gym, Stairmaster, weighted pack on the treadmill, steep up the incline. You know, leg exercises like Dave in the gym last night doing leg press, build up strength in your legs, and it will pay dividends at altitude.
100%. And yeah, just being as fit as you can be, I think, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, anytime I've gone and done anything and I've been fitter than usual, I always think that, wow, I got to keep this up.
Yeah.
Never do.
Yeah.
But
I love what Mark put there. I was ready to stab my tent
at
Island Peak Base Camp because he started Diamox and he was sleeping, snoring grand. Mark, you're not the only
earplugs, my friend. Earplugs.
Yeah.
Very good, expensive, noise-cancelling earplugs.
I know we've covered a lot, but there have been a lot of questions coming.
Should we dive in?
Should we start tackling some? Because otherwise, I know we got like 35 minutes there, but
no worries.
Just crack on through them. Obviously, any questions, guys, do post them here. That me and Dave try and answer them before the end of the live.
Awesome. So Chris Collins, how's it going, Chris boy?
Hey, Chris.
You're preparing your kit for EBC trip in May, which has been delayed for 3 years due to COVID.
Long time.
Feels like a long time. Your question is about
Chris?
pants, the over ones, not the under ones. So we're thinking American pants here, I think is what we're going with.
Is he going for the American?
Any recommendations that don't break the bank? Also, how much of my kit should I try to buy while over there?
Good question.
Since it is supposed to be cheaper, and any suggestions as to where? Thanks much, love, Chris. So, Chris, with regards to pants, like the American pants,
Is that American accent?
that is the best I could do at such short notice.
Well, we'll give you a
Yeah, I'm a method actor, mate. I need weeks to prepare.
passing grade on that.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think you have to break the bank on these types of things for doing EBC. Generally speaking, I'll bring about 2, maybe 3 pairs.
Yeah.
And the ones that I normally go to, I'll get like Frag Hoppers, the Kiwi Stretch Pro, or the Montaigne Terra stretch pants. You can notice a theme here. I like the stretch. There's also North Face do some pretty good, decent ones. I'm generally looking at around between 50 and 70 pounds for some trousers. You know, just to put that into context, for Paramo or some high-end Rab stuff, you can spend over 200. I'd probably suggest at least one of those pairs that you bring like a warmer, wintry kind of pair. I'm thinking for Calipata. And then also pack some over trousers that are like waterproof. Honestly, I don't buy any of my main kit over there. I always get 99% of all my kit, all the important stuff, back home. If I am going to buy something when I'm over there, it'll be like, if I see a cool t-shirt, I might buy a water bottle if I forgot mine, maybe some trekking poles if you don't want to carry them everywhere in your bag, that type of thing. But when it comes to you know, like proper base layers, fleeces, jackets, trousers, I'd get it all in the at home.
Definitely.
There's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get it over there, even though there is hundreds and thousands of shops. It's a lot of them tend to sell the same thing over and over again. And then there are some other shops like North Face, Mountain Equipment that are in Kathmandu, but you'll pay the same price.
Yeah, and certainly Dave's right there. With majority, you know, 80-90% of your gear you want to have before, just to get used to using it. But yeah, you know, in full transparency, you could probably turn up with nothing, and we've known people who come with hardly anything and get it all there. Obviously, you know, not the best quality. Some of it is questionable, but it can get you through the trek. Because we appreciate that, you know, there's equipment, you know, and if you haven't got much equipment, it can be quite expensive to buy it all in preparation. You know, but if you have got a bit of time, look out for the deals on the way. You don't have to get the best of everything. There are a few things that we'd say we probably wouldn't go cheap on, and that would be your boots, because you need to look after your feet. A decent down jacket, although if you come into Nepal, obviously you can use ours. Use an Evertrek one. A decent bag, you know, and potentially a good kind of waterproof jacket. I mean, everything else really, you know, mid layers, base layers, socks, underpants, trousers, trekking poles. You know, you can get out there, but you really want to try and use it before you go, just so you get used to, you know, especially I was reminded on the weekend that obviously layering and tackling different, you know, weather conditions is individual. It's not, you know, like Dave runs hotter than me when we're trekking, so he doesn't really wear much, wears maybe a t-shirt. I've noticed other people will hike with a t-shirt and a jumper and a jacket when they're physically on the move. You wouldn't do that. You'd sweat too much.
Really.
You know, finding out what works for you is by having all the equipment, putting it in your bag, and then finding out that, you know, finding out yourself how you go in, you know, here in the UK or whatever you are, and then that'll put you in good stead for when you're out there. You haven't got to kind of create that. You know what works for you, because you're doing the same. If you've got all the gear that you use here for hiking, for trekking, you know, in the UK weather, which is all season, you'll be fine for that equipment for Everest Base Camp. Nice, good questions this week though as well. May as well talk about this one. It's quite a big one, this one, but Richard Wathwell. Hello, I know that Evertrek takes safety very seriously and the overall well-being of your trekking customers. Damn right. Read the sad news about the other day, mountaineer and father of 2 who passed away altitude on the Everest trek. Please can you tell me what measures Evertrek takes up in the mountains and the blood oxygen levels, etc. I say quite a long question here, but please can you expand on the above? Thanks in advance, Rick. You know, this happened when you met this guy, right? And he was on the trek in October 2019.
Yeah, October 2019.
A few years ago it happened.
So right? you kind of, he's a Welsh guy.
Yeah.
I think he was from Cardiff.
Yeah, from Cardiff, literally just outside. Yeah.
And I arrived at Dingboche, and then he was already on his second day in Dingboche.
Yeah, the acclimatization.
And then I saw he had I think he had a Welsh top or a Welsh hat on, something anyway. And I was like, hey, Welsh, you know, just brief exchange, bit of banter, Borada, you know.
Yeah.
And then he went on to Lobouche, and then the next day, then our guide told us that, oh, you're from Wales. Oh, sadly, a guy passed away.
Yeah.
So it's horrible. I don't know enough. No one really knows enough other than people investigating about what happened. One thing I've read pretty consistently is that he had a blood oxygen level of around 60. And I can confidently say that if anyone gets a reading of 60 on our trips, then unfortunately their life and their well-being comes first, and they go down straight away.
Yeah.
So we do take, our guys are highly experienced. Many of them have summited Everest. Many of them are from the high regions of the Himalaya, so they know how to survive and thrive up there.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, they do take the readings on the finger, but that's just one reading. It's a good indication of how someone is, but it's not
always right.
It's not always entirely accurate, and it doesn't always tell the full story. So our guys look out for a lot of things. So appetite, how much water you've drank, what your pace is like, how tired and exhausted you are, whether that person's really sleepy, whether they feel sick, whether they have a headache, where that headache is in their brain, you know, is it in the back, the front, the sides, behind the eyes? And they're able to piece together a good story about how to treat that. We are very conscious of getting that type of thing caught early, because it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the trip. We can get them on Diamox, get them hydrated, and normally people can bounce back and complete the trip. I don't know what happened with this poor fella. You know, I really do feel for his family and stuff, because he was out there raising for a good cause.
Yeah.
But I know he had a blood oxygen level of 60 when he went to bed at Low Boucher, which is 4,900 meters.
Yep.
And I just think, I don't know the circumstances, but I know if he were, I would be thinking it's time to get him down.
Yeah.
But then, you know, if it's at night, you can't always get helicopters at night, so you have to wait till the next morning anyway. So I don't know. But all I can tell you is that someone has an oxygen level like that, it's time to evacuate. It's time to get you down to safety, and get you healthy. And we take into account all of those things, like I said. Yeah,
it's hard, isn't it? Because we're obviously trying to be subjective here, not you know, downplay or anything. You know, it's very sad, and obviously wasn't an Evertrekker. You know, we would love to have him with us, but you can get unlucky at altitude. That can happen. I think any time you go in the mountains, these things can happen. I think he's very, very unlucky. Also, as well, you know, I mean, this isn't to say that the company didn't do this, but you know, there are things that it doesn't just, it's not a flip of a switch. There would have been things happening in the build up to that maybe could have been avoided. But again, you know, we don't know enough information to say about all that. But it is hard, and you know, in terms of what we do, because we can control that, is that, you know, we, like Dave said, we do a lot of things, and the guides know how to manage people at altitude. You know, we've had to turn people around against their will, because, you know, at the end of the day, if this thing's happening to your body, life's more important than getting to base camp or getting to the summit of Kili. You know, you can come back and do it again. You know, I've been in tears myself trying to talk to someone and having to turn them around, and it's very hard, because you know, the build up to it, but life is more important. You know, if there's certain signs that are happening and certain symptoms, we want to get you down. Like we were talking about Jen, obviously one of an Evertrek, and my wife as well. And
I thought you were going to say one of my wives.
One of my wives. No, we got that many. But yeah, she did TubeCal in December and got suspected HAPE. And you know, there's lessons we can learn from that, and from, you know, her having those issues, and her lungs were really bad, and you know, it's a good job she wasn't at altitude for that long. But you know, in terms of getting people down, you have to, and like, you know, Jen couldn't go and do the summit because she couldn't, you know, and obviously conversations with the guide meant she had to stay, you know, at the refuge. And it's hard to kind of do that, because after all the preparation, everything, it's all the build up, it's hard, but no, it's more important.
It was that was a tough one. I mean, it's unusual to have HAPE at that altitude, you know, at the refuge, but I'm as near as certain as I've ever been that it was that. But I remember that day, you know, it was horrible, because you kind of know the day before that this is not going to be straightforward, but you also don't want to write people off, because I've seen people, you know, start Diamox or whatever, and the next day they have a good night's sleep, and it turns out they were just a bit tired the day before, and they had a headache. It happens. The pressure difference can affect you. But the next day, I remember when we set off, Jen had that where even on the flat, just as soon as you take a step, just immediately out of breath.
Yeah, that's something going on there, wasn't
it? And she absolutely made the right. And I know, you know, turning around on those tricks,
it's hard.
Is a real struggle. But
mentally,
hopefully that guy, his family, and everything is doing okay. I think, it's always a tricky one, and I think Andy made a good point there, which is you can be unlucky.
Yeah.
You know, it certainly is true that the fitter you are, the healthier you are, the slower you go, the more you drink, the less likely it is that you're going to have altitude sickness.
Yeah.
However, you could be all those things and you can still get sick
Yeah.
from altitude, or you can still get run down,
Yeah.
or suffer some negative consequences of being that high. And it's part of the reason. Honestly, it's part of the reason why we go. Altitude is what makes it a challenge.
Exactly, and it is there's an element of danger. Trekking altitude can be dangerous. And we've had customers who have suffered, and we have to get them out there. And it's I think you've got to be comfortable with that, because what you don't want is to go there and be surprised by that. You think, there's ways to manage it, and it is a safe environment. I've taken family there myself. I'm very comfortable taking people to altitude, and a lot of our thousands of avid trekkers have had an awesome time. But you go into an oxygen deprived environment, it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But as long as you're comfortable with that, and you do the right things, and you go out there to achieve something, that's all you can do, I think.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good question, and we wanted to. I hope we tackled it the right way. We didn't want to come across that we're kind of slating any other company or anything, and because we just don't know the full facts, and
no,
it's very, very, very unlucky. But sometimes those kind of things can also happen at sea level.
Yeah, I mean,
it can which they can.
I mean, it is sad when anyone sort of goes and does the trip of a lifetime, and Jesus loses their life in the process. That's horrendous,
Yeah.
But we don't know what happened beyond some of the things you'll read in the news, and I think most people know that shouldn't believe everything you read in the news. So hopefully maybe the full facts will come out, maybe they won't.
Yeah, I think that's why it's there now, because I think there's obviously some follow up to it.
Yeah, and I just think one of the biggest things that we can say, and it was funny, I was reading an article the other day, and I think it was about climbing the Matterhorn, and it was one of those like online, people do like online like seminars and things like that, and it was about this woman who's guides the Matterhorn. I really should have remembered her name, but anyway, and she was saying about like the mindset and stuff like that it takes to actually climb at that altitude and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things it's a delicate balance, because we are strong believers in a strong mindset, a strong will to complete the challenge, but also you've got to balance that with the reality of, if you're not well, you've got to be a strong enough person to be able to turn around.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to accept it when you've reached your summit, your limit.
Exactly.
And that's what she says about climbing the Matterhorn. She was like, you can't do all challenges by just being not a quitter. Certain times the mountain gods just say no.
Even Serrano fines and oh Jesus, I don't know why I put that up so far, but I'll leave it there. Jerome, we'll come on to your question in a second. But sometimes even Bear Grylls, even the best kind of your heroes, they all have to turn around at some point. Everyone does. Even one of our heroes right here has to turn around. I did.
Yeah, and it was on
10 minutes into I had an asthma attack. 10 minutes into a hike. What was it back in November? It was
back in Beacons.
Literally, it was about 10 minutes in. But these things can happen to anyone.
It does. Yeah. Was yours caught on camera and filmed for film? No.
Luckily.
Yeah. No. That can happen at any moment.
Right. So, is there a connection of age to altitude issues, Jerome? No, not at all. There's no science around that. From what we've seen, asked this specific question actually at the altitude center, but when it comes to age is not a gauge for anything at altitude, because it's really a leveler from fitness and a leveler from age. The only thing that would be affected is that your recovery. As you do get older, your body takes longer to recover each day, and so the aching muscles can probably come into it. But from when it comes to oxygen and how that process is, unless you've got any medical issues, it doesn't affect it. We've had people in their mid-70s do get to Everest Base Camp, just as well as someone in their 20s. To be honest, the kind of, just from our experience, someone in their, say, 50s or 60s who've got quite a strong will, they've got a lot of experience in dealing with challenge, rather than someone in their 20s who hasn't, is probably more prepared because of the mental challenges that happen. I'd say, we when we're young and we're trying to prove ourselves, naturally we get quite competitive. Not to say mature people don't, but you can go faster when you're younger because you've got more energy and you're like, I'm the best, I'm the best. But in essence, or altitude, that's not what you want. You want to go slow and steady and enjoy it. And sometimes, that can happen when it comes to age.
Yeah, I think I remember speaking to a marathon runner that I used to know called Phil.
Yeah.
And he was 44 when I knew him, and he'd be slightly older now. And I was asking him, like, do you reckon you'll ever go for like some speed runs, get some PBs and stuff? I remember him saying to me, like, I'm getting to that age now where actually naturally I see people slow down as they get older, but he's becoming a better distance runner.
Yeah.
And I think trekking is sort of in that realm where the speed that I think our customers turned up.
Oh yeah. Wow. They thought they'd come in and join the live.
So yeah, I think like you do get as you get older, perhaps you're less inclined to be the fastest to the top.
Yes.
You're more inclined to just get to the top in your own pace, and maybe that subtle change does help people at altitude, because if you're going slower, if you're taking your time, if you're there more for the experience than a PB,
exactly.
As a result, you'll go slower, you'll acclimatize better, and you won't suffer as some, we've known ultra triathletes, that have got to be the first to the top. I mean, I seriously do admire people like this, because
he's a great guy as well. I know the person you're talking
about. But went a little bit too fast.
Yeah.
In the first 2 to 3 days.
And he admits, doesn't he? At the end, he was like, I should have gone to the back, and that's okay. That's part of the learning.
Having said that, I heard he ran to the summit of Killy from Stella Point.
He did.
So but those people, like,
fair dues to
with those,
it's brilliant.
I got to be honest, a little part of me, if someone says to me, Dave, is it a good idea to run to EBC? I'd say absolutely not. But then if a triathlete comes to me and he's like, Dave, I want to run to EBC, I can't turn that guy down for a challenge. I mean, part of me loves that sort of mindset.
Yeah.
But equally, if we're talking about trekkers, if we're talking about you guys and us, it's probably best to go slow. Take your time. Be there just as much for the experience and the joy of it, as opposed to a PB and the challenge, and you'll be successful.
Exactly. We'll cover what we got, about 50. We only got a few more, but we'll try and speed these up. I know we've been given some long answers, but we hope we're trying to do it justice. Just while Anthony's on here, I think Jody has put our email address there, Anthony, just about if you want to bring your trek forward to March for your birthday. I'm sure there's always something we can do regarding squeezing people in if it needs to happen, Anthony, especially if it's just yourself, mate. What a great time or great place to celebrate your birthday. And as Jody said there, just drop us an email, we can sort that out for you. Just going to throw out there as well, just before we go on, because earlier today, yesterday evening, depending when we switched it on, I know we got a team that does that. You would have seen on social media that we launched a new competition. So we're doing another competition for 2 people to win a free trip, obviously excluding flights and all the fights.
You're not allowed to fight over it.
Excluding flights. you got me thinking about that. Bloody hell. Obviously with the trip, then get yourself entered. We'll put the link in here, just so you can get yourself entered, and obviously we'll open to the Evertrekker community, and we'll be doing the announcement on the 21st of February, I believe. Tuesday, I'm just going to double check. 21st of February. So definitely tune in for that one in a few weeks. But get yourself entered. It's always great. We always have a lot of good energy around the competitions we've done over the last kind of 5-6 years. And we love giving 2 people an opportunity to go and do these trips for free, which is quite cool. We always love to hear about those journeys. I think we got some. I wonder if we got anyone on here that's actually won a trip. I'm just trying to see who's on the line.
Bry's got his winner's speech.
Bry has he's been second so many times.
He's gonna have to blow the dust off that thing again, isn't he? And try and do it.
Right, just to go through these questions then.
Should we smash them?
How do you deal with your asthma at high altitude, Susan? Susan, I think I talked about it at the beginning of the live. Asthma doesn't necessarily stop you from high altitude as long as you can manage it at sea level. You can manage it. That's one of my pump. Sorry, mate, I'm good. As long as you can manage it at sea level and manage it when you're doing physical exercise, it's the same at high altitude. So definitely, and I highly recommend as well, if you go to previous lives, there was a live, I think, called Take My Breath Away. But anyway, it was all about asthma. It did a whole live just about asthma. Have a little look at that. I wrote an article on the Knowledge Centre on the website as well about asthmatics at altitude. Give it, if there's a little search bar, just type in asthma there, and it'll come up with all the articles I've discussed asthma, just so it can maybe give you a little bit of confidence before going. Dave.
Mark Drummond has asked an interesting question. How much diamonds do you recommend taking to EBC plus 6,000 meter peak? I'll be honest with you.
Diamox?
Probably Diamox, yeah. I'll answer them both anyway. You don't really need any diamonds unless you're bringing a potential fiance with you, and in which case I would suggest one. And I hear it's 3 months' wages you should save up for the rings.
Diamox, Dave.
Well, okay, but with regards to Diamox, so there's no kind of set limit, to be honest with you. You don't have to take any.
Yeah.
What we recommend is start the trek, and if you start to feel some of those symptoms that require you to take Diamox, so we're thinking like sleep disturbances, loss of appetite, if you start getting headaches or feeling a bit nauseous, we normally recommend starting with half a pill in the morning, half a pill in the evening. And then upping that to a full pill in the morning and a full pill in the evening, should you not see any improvements. That is usually more than enough for absolutely anybody to start to see the benefit.
Nice. What's the next one?
The next one, just is there any correlation between breathing / altitude and age? This is from Jerome. Okay, we just cracked that one.
Done that one.
Dan Saxon, hi team. At what altitude should you expect to use oxygen?
Good question.
You're not going to be required to take any oxygen on any of our trips. You're probably looking at around, as you're approaching 8,000 meters, so between 7,000 and 8,000 meters. So you're talking on, pretty much only exclusively 8,000 meter peaks where you're going to start taking oxygen. Each team and each company and guide all have like different philosophies. Some will start you on a high flow rate earlier. Some start you on a lower flow rate a bit later. It all depends on how you acclimatize, but generally between 7,000 and 8,000 meters is when you're going to start. Our highest trek is Aconcagua, which is just shy of 7,000 and doesn't require supplemental oxygen. So only worry about that if you have aspirations to climb an 8,000 meter peak.
Which, if you do, awesome. Some good questions though. You're talking about breathing and altitude. My question is, what other symptoms could you get from being that high? Dave, can you answer that one? Just want to find this.
Mate, crack on. Who asked that?
That was Jason Townsend.
Jason Townsend. You're talking about what other symptoms could you get from being that high? So when you're at high altitude, there's a number of different things that everybody is gonna start to feel. One of those is shortness of breath. So that's the breathing. That's when you're sleeping, you might have that waking up like that. Now, if you're asking sort of what are the symptoms of altitude sickness, so generally speaking, it's a collection of symptoms that we put together. One of those is you'll almost certainly suffer headaches, nausea, loss of appetite, lack of energy. That's generally, even at that level, one or two of those things can be treatable and we can kind of keep you going. If those things start to get worse and worse and worse, and you get to a point where you're starting to get AMS or acute mountain sickness, that's sort of like you're bedridden. It feels like you've got the flu. You can't really do anything. Those are sort of the main cluster of things that you can expect to experience. There are other things that most people experience that are completely normal. A little bit of headache behind the eyes. It's normally due to the pressure difference or something like that. Also, a little bit of a headache if you go high. We go high and climb high, sleep low. On those climb high days, you might get a bit of a headache. You might feel a bit woozy. And then you go down and you have a good night's sleep and some water, and then you wake up and you feel okay. So, all of those things are kind of perfectly normal to experience at altitude.
Just read Samantha Wright as well. Lady on my EBC trip was asthmatic. She trained lots, coped brilliantly. And then I just finished it off. And she managed karaoke in Namche. See, nothing wrong with asthmatics, can't sing. Absolutely. Some really good questions. Diane, actually, I think she's posted it a couple of times. And Diane, sorry, mate, we're just going through these questions. Do an island peak without EBC? Is there definitely still plenty of acclimatization? Yes. So all of our trips, Diane, are built with acclimatization. There's enough. We wouldn't want any of our trips. And that includes, Annapurna region, any trip that you go on. I mean, there's sometimes where you're limited with the landscape. We try and do our best with regards to managing that. We obviously don't get it right all the time, but we know with island peak trips that we've done before, the altitude profile is really good for that.
Awesome. Chris Collins, I've got Everest Base Camp in May, and you've got you're a long distance runner. You've got 3 marathons. If this is going to be about fitness, I'm going to be so annoyed.
You're going to be fine.
I'm going to be furious.
That's more than I'd say 95% of trekkers.
Let's finish the question. He might not be asking me about fitness, because if he is, I'm going to be seriously annoyed. But maybe I've done enough hiking training. Should I do more? Okay, it's not strictly about fitness. You're all right, Chris. Yeah, you'll be fine, mate. Really, you can walk. We've all, we're all pretty decent walkers. That's all you're required to do. The only small addition I would make is perhaps do some walking with like a pack on your back and things like that.
Yeah.
But marathon runners and long, they tend to have really good core. Talk to Bry. Bry's done, tons of marathons and running, and I even heard that he substituted for Santa last year.
Well, yeah, because I think he's done like 17,000 marathons now.
Yeah, exactly.
Few, isn't he?
I mean,
dressed up as Santa. Right?
I think Santa's sled was actually grounded this year due to some sort of aviation issue. But yeah,
well, another strike.
Yeah, you'll be absolutely fine, mate. Honestly, that fitness, that if you can run a marathon, you are plenty fit enough, and you shouldn't have any details whatsoever. Difficulties.
No, brilliant. No, honestly, it's true. Any time that because marathon running is great, but just walking, just getting out there, pack on your back, walking is will do just fine, because that's what you'll be doing. You're not going to do any running, but it will. Obviously, your body's going to be in a good place, and then, like Dave said, just slow, steady, enjoy yourself, and you will have an awesome time. Jackie Bentley, hi. How long does the response from the altitude center training plan normally take? Submitted 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, sometimes, Jackie, it depends on when you're going to go, because I think what they do is they don't want to, because they've got kind of an idea in terms of the distance before you go, is that they will kind of get in touch with you nearer to your trip. Speaking to the guys there over the last kind of 12 months, we know that once you submit it, it's not quite quick. It can be sometimes if you go in quite soon, but then they'll send you the plan basically for yourself. So yeah, they will get in touch with you. I'm sure as well, if any urgent stuff, just drop them a little email. Just say, hey, how's it going? Just waiting for looking forward to my trip. Filled in my form. Any idea when I'm going to get my plan? Might just get in touch with them directly, mate, and definitely see what they come back with.
Yeah. Awesome. Mark Charity summited Mount Snowdon 3 times in one day in June for cancer research. Does that stand me in good stead for getting to EBC? Yes. Lorna Howard, Diamox, do you take it for the whole trip or just when you need it? So the rule is that you don't have to take it, but once you do start taking it, you should then stay on it for the rest of the trip, or at least until you're back at the same altitude where you started taking it. Yeah. But yeah, generally speaking, I would say, so for an example, we start the trip, I get to Namche, I start feeling unwell, I start taking Diamox, I should take it then till at least I get back to Namche. What will happen is if you start taking Diamox, you feel better, and you're still on your way up, and then you stop taking it, you'll lose any of the benefit that you've had in that. It's similar to sort of imagine like starting on oxygen, getting to the top and going, I feel okay now, and taking your oxygen away. All of a sudden your acclimatization is going to take a big dip. So very important that once you start taking it, you keep taking it until you no longer need to, which is the end of the trip or the same altitude you started on.
Definitely. Very important with Diamox. It's a great tool though, and that's why we use it as a tool. Like with headaches, obviously, people who take headache pills, treat headaches, similar. Diamox, back in the beginning, I think I used to be opposed to it until I actually learned, over the last several years, how powerful it can be, and literally hundreds and hundreds of ever trackers.
I've taken it.
Yourself, yeah. I mean, I took it one night in Gorakshep, and it can make a hell of a difference. I've seen people just completely turn around and be the strongest from being the kind of people who are struggling, and so it could definitely be a good tool. Mark Walker, how difficult is the Island Peak trek? So Island Peak, it's over 6,000 meters, 6,186 meters above sea level. So definitely a challenge. Anytime you go high altitude, it's a challenge. Certainly, it's not a technical peak, although there's about 120 meter section where you're on fixed ropes. The rest of it, you want experience really using crampons, using an ice axe. Any time that you can spend on ice and snow will help you. But certainly we've had people who've turned up, hey, I want to go Island Peak. They booked Island Peak. They did Island Peak, even though they didn't have all the experience. Because you can kind of, it's like learning on the job, if you like. It's kind of learning on the trek. Obviously the trekking part of it is, 80% of the trip, and then you've got a few days then on the mountain. But certainly, I mean, we always do suggest that if you've been to a high altitude before, it helps a lot, because you know what it takes to manage your body at high altitude. But in terms of difficulty level, we'd certainly say that it's kind of, if we had a gauge, kind of like a 4 level gauge, it'd probably be a 3. we would say, in terms of difficulty level regarding the direct. We've got one called Ultimate Island Peak, which involves Everest Base Camp and 2 high passes. That would be probably the hardest route that we do, but better for acclimatization. You've got the time. It's one of the best journeys in the Everest region you could have.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
One from Mark Drummond. Does
Mark
being
Drummond, yeah.
diabetic affect altitude or insurance? So with regards to the altitude, I think as long as you know how to manage your diabetes, there's no reason why it should contribute any more or less to you getting any altitude sickness or anything. Potentially, obviously, if you start to neglect your diet, or if you haven't taken any supplements or medications that you need to, it'll absolutely, as soon as your body starts to struggle with anything, it could be diabetes, you could have picked up a virus or a cold, acclimatization becomes more difficult. So really do some research into how you need to look after it at altitude, and bring any food, snacks, or medications you need to keep that going.
Yeah.
Insurance, almost certainly it'll affect your insurance. It's always important to declare every single sort of medical condition you have if you're asked, because even if your claim isn't related to it, it can still invalidate the policy.
You don't want to risk it, do you?
Yeah. So I mean, I've noticed that since I had insurance with True Traveller on my last trip, and it went up, I think, £8.
Yeah.
Because of I had to declare that I had an operation.
Nice.
So yeah, £8. So
brilliant. Although Mark's more important question is the Rasta Bar still in Namche?
Actually, you know what? I don't know.
I don't know. I've never been to the Rasta Bar. When did you go there, Mark? All the times I've been there was a Rasta Bar down in Fatting that I went to the first time there for a couple of beers. Before the trip. I know. On the way down now, we changed that. But yeah, was that in Namche? I don't know where that was.
Yeah.
Next time we'll have a little look. Yeah, well, that's all the questions. I know there was a couple of 2016. Yeah, that was the same year I was there as well. Interesting, Mark. Rasta Bar in Namche.
I was here in 2016.
Where's the Rasta Bar? I'm just trying to wrap my brain. I will have a look. I know this is clearly the most important question on the line.
Yeah, welcome to the Tuesday Tuning, guys, and we're going to talk today about the bars of the Himalaya.
You know what? That'd be a pretty good live.
Oh, God, I bet you we'd have some people there.
Near the Irish pub. Nope, still.
I think it is.
Bells.
Now it's ringing a bell. I think I got a picture of it somewhere.
Really?
On my first trip with Billy.
Maybe I just didn't kind of click that it was.
Yeah, because you go straight to the Irish bar.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Great stuff. But no, there's some good sort of comments about Andy Hawkins. Use the altitude center hypoxic equipment. Followed a 4-week plan last November for a quick ascent in the Andes. It worked perfectly. Great stuff. Yeah, and there's a lot of science behind it. And we hear a lot of the kind of high end operators on Everest. Talking 150k, 200k above. They use hypoxic training before they climb Everest, and they're only there for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
it definitely works. And definitely the science of using that 100% works. We always, all of our kind of advice comes from, if you can't have that equipment and you can only acclimatize on the trip, there are numerous things that you can do to help.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm going to experiment with those over the next few years, because I'll be climbing quite a lot of peaks, and I'm going to be using some of the altitude center equipment as well, just to kind of, so I can come back and let everyone know how we got on with that as well.
Yeah.
But right, it's been a great live actually. It's flown by. It's an hour already. Bloody hell.
Breathtaking, mate. Absolutely breathtaking.
No, yeah. I mean, just to kind of summarize then, Dave. Obviously, we're talking about breathing, difficulties at high altitude. There's obviously a lot that goes into it. I hope we've covered some of the kind of key bits around if you have got issues, obviously there's ways to manage them, but if you can manage certain things at sea level, you can manage them at altitude. Certainly if it comes to asthmatics, anyone with these lung issues. Any final words, Dave, from you regarding everything we talked about?
Stefan Ols has asked a good question, actually. It's caught my opinion, so I think I'll finish with that one. Yeah, K2 Base Camp. The reason why it hasn't been sort of at the forefront is because we launched it kind of during COVID. And we haven't really had that first wave of Evertrekkers actually going there as of yet. But
July, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's July. So we'll probably do a big live about K2 Base Camp.
Yeah,
as soon as we've got the we've got some test pilots
content.
going out there and stuff like that.
We've got a lot of content of it, yes,
and running it, but
he's
no,
on it.
Absolutely epic trip. It's on my bucket list. It was one that I really, really wanted to.
Well, my sister's booked on. She's going in August next year, so I'll probably be heading out before then.
Yeah.
But certainly, yeah, it's Stefan. When it comes to obviously all the trips that we do, any questions around it, do ask. We do when it comes to obviously specific trips. It's sometimes a lot easier that we've done most of them, but not all of them. That's one of our newer trips that we do.
Yeah.
How high is it, Samantha? It's 5,100 meters base camp. So a little bit less than Everest base camp, but it's actually harder to get to.
And camping a lot of the way.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more
rugged.
remote, and traveling through Pakistan is like an adventure all on its own. But back to the this. I mean, obviously, this is what we do when it comes to high altitude trekking. And I think that I'm a big believer, as I said at the start, that knowledge dispels fear. So if you are afraid of the consequences of trekking at high altitude, the best thing that you can do is kind of educate yourself on what those consequences are, because there's always ways that you can mitigate them and manage them and stay healthy and happy and be successful in the Himalayas, or any high peak you go to. So I think, if you have any questions and you want to know anything about it at all, just get in touch with myself, Andy. The team will happy to go through it.
Bri, have I won yet? Well, Bri, find out on the 21st of February. Yeah. Right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hope it's been useful today. Talking about high altitude and into very thin air. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. But any questions at all, do direct them to the team.
Yeah.
Obviously via the messenger on the website, via Facebook. But have an awesome week wherever you're up to, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Take it easy.
Bye.